On the 28th of April 2025, Spain and Portugal both suffered a countrywide power outage lasting many hours. It made me wonder what I would do in that situation. How would I cope without power? Today I'm going to talk through how likely this is in various countries and what we might do to protect ourselves. I'll try to help you consider what preparedness means for you. On that day, on the 28th of April, the Spanish grid operator was struggling with low-frequency oscillations in the power system and changed the network configuration to dampen these oscillations to keep the grid stable. The oscillations stopped and all seemed well. However, at 12:33, grid voltage started to vary from the norm, and some fossil fuel generation systems that were intended to provide active voltage regulation failed to do so. In one case, reportedly doing exactly the opposite of what was being requested, further exacerbating the situation. The lack of sufficient voltage control caused the grid voltage to rise further from normal, starting a cascade of disconnections of generators, with total blackout in Portugal and most of Spain the end result. Restarting a huge electricity grid is a very complex thing to do. Think of the huge inrush of current into all of that equipment that had been left on when the power went down, and how difficult that is to manage as generators join the network and supply is slowly restored. Recovering from a large outage takes time. It has to be done carefully and methodically to stop the failure recurring, and power to the whole country would take many hours to be fully restored. Portugal declared success after about 11 hours, and Spain after more like 15 hours. That's a long time to be without electricity, isn't it? Imagine living in Spain and being without power for 12 hours or more, not sure when it was coming back on, when life would start to return to normal. Think of all of the things that you would be without if power were to fail so widely. Public transport systems were disrupted, trains were unable to run without signalling, and driving severely disrupted by a lack of traffic signals, street lighting and information, not to mention all of the fuel pumps and chargers being offline. Mobile phone coverage would disappear pretty quickly as backup power ran out. There would probably be no home internet, and a fear of a loss of water would cause people to try to stockpile from local shops. Even the gas supply could be affected for people who still use gas. What would you do? How prepared are you for that? Makes you wonder, doesn't it? Fortunately, it's not all that common a problem. Here in the UK, our power network is pretty resilient, as we can see from the reliability statistics. That's something I covered in a previous video. I'll link to that one from the end screen as well as from the description. Most of mainland Europe benefits from being highly interconnected, with each country helping to support the others around it. Due to a peculiarity of geography, Spain and Portugal are a bit more isolated. They have fewer neighbours. In hindsight, it seems they were more at risk than a lot of the rest of Europe. Texas's ERCOT looks similarly vulnerable, as they discovered in February 2021, when very unusual weather brought their network to its knees for several days. That was a wake-up call for America. They got their warning 4 years before we did in Europe, but we can all learn from both. Wide area power losses are rare, but even a local outage could cause us some bother. After all, a fire at a substation near Heathrow caused a lot of people a very bad day or two back in mid-March. It took the authorities longer than it should have to start drawing power from another substation, and they ended up with a lot of work to do to check that systems had come back up properly once power was restored, and so customers were left in a quandary for quite some time. I've been considering getting a solar system for a few years, and I had a notion that it would be nice for that system to keep working during a power outage in my area. Something that's possible with a solar system, but is an optional extra expense. A solar system is an investment, and one that I haven't yet managed to undertake. At first I was waiting for the Tesla Powerwall 3 to be released, to see what it brought that was new and better. When it finally was released, it was attractive. LFP is a better chemistry for home storage than NMC, in my opinion. After all, you want that battery to cycle at least once a day, possibly more, depending on the size of your system and your energy usage, as well as the tariff you're on. The option to use a system to save you money goes beyond capturing solar and could extend to energy arbitrage in the extreme, buying electricity cheaply from the grid when there is an abundance and then selling it back when the price goes up again. That helps the grid and shortens the payback period of the system, but requires a lot of cycling of the battery. That desire to charge and discharge on at least a daily basis makes for a lot of battery cycles, more than NMC can support for a period of 10 years or more, the minimum sort of period for which you'd want your battery system to remain operational. Sadly, it's currently too difficult for me to justify the expense of a large solar installation to make that investment. The payback period is a bit too long to suit my current finances and the time for which I can be sure I will be in my current house. Therefore, that purchase has had to go on the back burner again. But when that blackout hit the Iberian Peninsula, having already seen the problem at Heathrow, I was reminded of that desire to have a bit of autonomy with my power system, a bit more resilience than I have had before. Our electricity system is currently undergoing a huge and rapid transformation, far wider and faster than we've seen in the last 60 years, and so it might be a bit less reliable in the next 5 to 10 years, just a little bit. Whilst I think the possibility of a countrywide failure remains small, local outages of the distribution network might be a bit more likely in the next few years. A lot of individual solar systems feeding onto a network that wasn't designed for that is stressing it a bit more than in the past, testing its resilience and potentially exposing any weaknesses. So, is there anything I can do? Can I gain myself a bit of resilience, be a bit more prepared than I have been in the past? Well, for some people, the answer might lie in their car. Some EVs are offering vehicle to load, the ability to power a small number of items from an adapter on the car's charging port, and some even promise vehicle to home, the ability to backfeed power through the charger, but mine doesn't offer any of that, sadly. While some people will get that advantage when they switch to an EV, I went for a Zoe, and that can't support any of those things, at least not natively, so that's no help to me. You could invest in a petrol or diesel generator, that could be a thing. However, in order to be fairly sure it will start when you need it, you would have to maintain it and check it regularly. That wasn't of interest to me. Whilst I can't afford a full solar system, I started to wonder if there was a halfway house, a way to make a smaller investment and yet still reap some of the rewards. So I started looking around for portable solutions. When doing so, I discovered these things, solar generators. These are fairly small portable batteries with solar inputs with which you can DIY a bit of a system. There is no wiring required with one of these. They simply plug into the ring main in your house, and then you plug a few portable devices into the sockets on it. It can charge from solar or from the mains, and energy from either source runs the devices you plugged into it. That makes for some interesting possibilities. You could charge for free from the sun, but that involves installing solar panels as well. That's a bit more work and expense. In the meantime though, as a first step, I can charge it for very little from the mains using the overnight cheap rate I get from Octopus Energy as a result of having an EV. That lets me power my equipment using the stored energy that I bought cheaply at night, both when electricity is more expensive and when it's not available. There is no opportunity for arbitrage in terms of selling energy back to the grid with this, as it's not wired to output to the grid. But I can time shift my usage, using cheap electricity stored overnight to power my kit when energy is expensive, with the side benefit that my equipment remains powered if the electricity supply is lost, at least for a while. I like that approach. It meant I could spend some money and get some benefits straight away, and then consider spending more in the future to capture some solar and save some more money, if I can afford to down the line. Let me show you a bit of man maths on the cost effectiveness of time shifting using a power station. I'm using the Octopus Intelligent Go tariff, which costs just 28 pence per kilowatt hour during the day and 7 pence per kilowatt hour between 11:30 at night and 5:30 the following morning. We need to assume we will make some losses in the round-tripping of electricity through a power station. Let's assume we'll achieve no worse than 75% efficiency. In reality, I think we do a bit better than that, but let's go with a conservative number for this. So for each kilowatt hour we want to use during the day, we need to put in 1.34 kilowatt hours of electricity at night, which costs us 9.34 pence. The saving on that kilowatt hour of useful daytime energy is the difference between the standard rate and that overnight cost, and that's 18.66 pence per kilowatt hour. If we can time shift 2 kilowatt hours of electricity and do so 330 times a year, well, that's the number of days in a year less holidays when I might be away from home. And we should assume that the power station works for 10 years for the moment. Then the total saving in electricity costs over that time would be just over £1,231. So the question is whether we can buy a suitable power station for less than that. So can we achieve that? Well, it's not easy. We need almost 3 kilowatt hours of storage for our money. That's a lot of storage. But with a lot of patience, yes, it's just about possible now. I have seen the EcoFlow Delta 3 that I have here available for £609, and the EcoFlow Delta 2 Max extra battery that is compatible with it for £523. Together that's a total of £1,132. However, like I say, that requires a lot of patience. You have to wait and wait for the best sales to achieve that. There are a lot of sales of power stations, but they do vary in the savings available, and you will have to check multiple outlets as well. In reality, I didn't quite do it. I bought in an end-of-month sale in May. There's an end-of-month sale every month, by the way, and my prices were actually £649 for the power station and £617 for the extra battery, for a total of £1,266, £35 over budget. The best prices I quoted were actually in the Amundsen Prime Day sale in July, so I paid about £134 more than those best prices would have been. And as I say, £35 more than the total savings I estimated earlier, so that's the cost of being impatient. It's probably clear that this isn't a great money-saving tip. You can just about get a portable storage solution for the estimated savings from electricity time shifting, but there are some very obvious caveats. The first is that I'm making some fairly big assumptions about the cost of electricity in the future. There is a fairly good chance that the cost of electricity will go down in the next 10 years, so in reality I probably won't quite recoup my costs entirely. Furthermore, I'm assuming that the power station will last for 10 years, but I bought a known brand and it has a 5-year warranty, which gets me at least halfway there. I'm also not pressing the inverter particularly heavily, which is the part of it that's most likely to fail. Even so, in terms of an investment strategy, this isn't great. There is not a guaranteed saving here. However, I have gained a little protection against the electricity price temporarily going up again, were that to happen this winter, for example. Furthermore, I've made a bit of a hedge against inflation. I've paid up front for something whose cost is currently quite heavily impacted by inflation, minimising how that might affect my bills in the next 3 or 4 years. And finally, to the point of this video, I've gained myself a bit of resilience. If there are a few power cuts in the next 10 years, then I should be a bit better off than if I'd done nothing. I have some ability to run the microwave, to entertain myself by having the TV on, and to keep my internet router going, giving me a chance of finding out about the cause of the outage and when we might expect power to be restored. If it's cold, then I can even run an electric blanket or two if I need to, which, by the way, is by far the most efficient way to heat a small number of people. Spate heating is just too energy intensive to be able to support for any length of time off affordable battery storage, at the moment anyway. You have to temper your expectations as to what you can achieve with backup power. If it's heating that concerns you, and you don't consider electric blankets to be good enough solution for your needs, then look for an alternative heat source, perhaps a clean burning camping stove. But be very aware of the risks of both carbon monoxide and carbon dioxide poisoning, as well as the risk of fire. Those all remain very real problems associated with burning fuels. So in summary, I think there's a chance that the power grids will be a bit less reliable in the next few years, at least at a local level. And there are now techniques to give ourselves a bit of independence from the grid if you feel the need for that. Firstly, if you get a solar system, then you can have it run when the grid is down, but it's an extra you have to pay for. Solar systems do not offer this by default, so consider whether that cost is worthwhile. Next, if you have an EV, then you might have the option of using vehicle to load to give you a bit of power. Your car has a lot of storage on board, and if it supports vehicle to load or vehicle to home, then that might offer a useful backup. There is the option of having a petrol or diesel generator, but it's something you need to maintain and test frequently, and it's probably rarely useful for anything other than a power cut. Finally, if you can't do any of these others, if you rent, or if you don't want an EV despite the benefits, or your EV doesn't offer this backup power and you don't want a fossil fuel generator, then you might look at getting a small solar generator. Something portable that you can take with you between homes. You could even consider getting something bigger with more storage and time-shifting energy from cheap to expensive periods. You'll notice that I've not discussed any details of the Eco Delta 3 that I bought. That's because it warrants a video of its own. There are things to be said. It's not all good, unfortunately. Real-world usage has shown that it's not all rosy, which is something that reviewers of power stations don't seem to have discovered. Therefore, I'll do a video on that subject soon, so consider subscribing if you want to see that. Thanks very much for joining me. If you have questions or comments, then leave them in the appropriate section. I'd love to hear your thoughts in that section. Have you considered a backup power strategy? Are power cuts something that concern you? If you have a solution and I haven't mentioned it, then let us know about that too. If you've liked the video, then it's a big help to me if you click the thumbs up button, and I'd love to have you as a subscriber if you want to see more from me. Thanks.